impressed. Hello and welcome to the latest Daily Record live stream. I'm Paul Hutcheon, the Daily Record's political editor. I'm joined by two esteemed colleagues, Westminster editors Torcuil Crichton and Peter Davidson, who's the paper's live politics editor. We're just going to be chewing over the main events of this week that we've been writing about in the paper. I'm broadcasting from the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh, and quite close to the Parliament we have overflowing bins, which probably brings me to the top issue in Scottish politics this week, which is the national bin strike, which started in Edinburgh and is now spread to about 14 different council areas. Technically, it's a dispute between councils and trade unions, but given that councils depend on their funding from the government has now intervened. Torcuil, although you're based at Westminster, what's your take on this damaging row?
Well, I might not be in Edinburgh, but everyone across the UK has seen the visuals coming from Edinburgh in the last couple of weeks because, of course, national and international focus comes onto the city, the capital, during the Edinburgh Festival. And people haven't seen players, they've seen bins overflowing, people walking to festival venues past cartons of rubbish. And so as a visual protest, getting the bin men out in Edinburgh during the Edinburgh Festival was a great opening move by the trade unions. It's really put pressure on the councils and on the Scottish Government to try and sort this out. So we've seen, as you revealed yourself this morning, Paul, there's going to be another round of talks today, three-sided talks involving John Swinney, the Deputy First Minister, who's standing in for Finance Secretary Kate Forbes just now while she's on maternity leave. COSLA, the council's body, is going to be in there, and the trade unions are going to be in there as well. Now, the trade unions previously rejected a 3% offer from COSLA. The Scottish Government put £142 million of cash on the table to enable the councils to pay, they said, 5% to the council staff. COSLA have just turned around and said, we don't have the matching amount of money, the same amount to put in to bring us up to anywhere near that pay offer. So that was rejected by the trade unions. A 5% offer is now on the table or being put on the table, but that's still not good enough for the trade unions. They say, look at England, look at the situation in England where council workers there have struck a deal with English local councils for a near £2,000, 1950 flat rate increase for everyone. Now, for people at the lower end of the scale, people who are paid, perhaps 20, 21, 22,000, that's a big increase. It could be a 10% increase, which would just about meet inflation now. And for people who earn a bit more, obviously proportionally a bit less. So that 1950, that 10% rise is what the trade unions in Scotland are looking at, and they're looking at that plus. They want a bit more than that. So there's talks this afternoon. Swinney talked to the trade unions yesterday. All three sides are in today. So we might move swiftly to resolution, because if it doesn't happen, the bins are going to be overflowing all over Scotland, not just in Edinburgh.
Peter, let's look at the role of the Scottish Government in this. They brought an extra 140 million to the table in a bid to resolve the dispute. That resulted in COSLA increasing the offer to about 5%. That wasn't good enough. John Swinney met the unions in COSLA yesterday. There's another meeting planned for this afternoon in St Andrew's House. Do you sense that the Scottish Government are getting increasingly worried that they might be blamed for this?
Yeah, well, if you were on Twitter over Monday and over the weekend, the blame was getting pinged about everywhere. Labour, who run council in Edinburgh, were getting blamed, and then Labour were blaming the government for not putting up the money, and then the SNP were going, well, no, it's Labour's to blame, and then I'm sure somebody blamed Westminster at some point as well. So everyone was getting the blame, and I think it was Angus Robertson blamed the council, which got a lot of blamed Labour because they are in power in the council. But what's going to be interesting to see is when the bins start to pile up in Glasgow and Dundee, which are run by the SNP, who's the SNP going to blame then? So there's this kind of big merry-go-round of who's to blame, but nobody's actually. I mean, at the start of the week, nothing was really happening to get the problem fixed, and I think John Swinney is really kind of after being asked by the unions to kind of get involved in the discussions, he really has kind of knocked heads together, it seems, and it looks like they're going to maybe find a deal. But as Torcuil was saying, I think until they get to maybe close to or beyond that £2,000 kind of number, then I think we could be here for quite a while, and more strikes to come as the unions have kind of threatened as well.
Torcuil, one of the things that interests me is that if you compare it to south of the border, where we have a Tory government, you get quite a lot of union bashing. I'm thinking of Grant Shapps' rhetoric and blaming union bosses and union chiefs. But we haven't really had that up here, have we, in Scotland, in terms of the bin strike? The focus has very much been on COSLA, it's been on the Scottish government. Do you think the temperature is slightly different in Scotland when it comes to industrial disputes?
Well, we don't have a Conservative government in Scotland trying to strip trade unions of the right to strike for a start. And to be fair to Shapps, at the beginning of, say, the RMT strike, he tried to put Network Rail at buffer, the same as COSLA is a buffer between the government and the strikers. The Tory government in England tried to put Network Rail as a buffer in between themselves and the strikers. That simply has disintegrated now, and it's a pretty hostile environment when it comes to the rail strikes. The same thing could have happened. There's a different dynamic in Scotland with a kind of left of centre government, left of centre trade union movement, and councils which are kind of Labour or SNP. Anyways, there's a different dynamic there. But there's also, this figure is coming in, John Swinney. John Swinney's got a bit of a reputation as a fixer. Remember, he's the guy who got money out of the UK Treasury when it came to a new settlement for Scotland after the Smith Commission. After Scotland could receive tax raising powers, he managed to extract a great deal by sitting down, talking it through. So he's a bit of a fixer, and he's got to fix this. But the government on the horns of a dilemma here. They can't. Sure, let's give £2,000 to every striking bin worker, and that'll clean up the streets. But in 2 weeks' time, nursery workers are going to walk out and strike, leaving nurseries and some schools in Scotland facing closure for a short time. That's going to inconvenience parents. And if you sort that one out, then Scottish nurses have said they're not happy with their 5% that's on the table, and teachers are unhappy as well. So the whole public sector there, like everyone else, is facing huge inflationary rises and cost of living price rises over the next couple of months. So the thing is, if you plug one leak, if you stop one dispute with money, you're then in danger of triggering a whole number of other disputes on the same line. So he's got to tread a fine line, Swinney, between sorting this, offering this, but showing some kind of restraint as well.
Peter, if you look at a couple of other unions like the RMT and ASLEF, through their strike action, they can stop trains running, which is a lot of power. Do you sense that the unions have the upper hand in this dispute as well, in the sense that they can, their strikes can result in overflowing bins, their strikes can stop schools from reopening because, of course, their members include janitors, cleaning staff. Do you sense that they have quite a lot of leverage here?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, you just need to look at some of the images in Edinburgh over the weekend. I was in Edinburgh on Friday and Saturday, and even then, that was only after one day on. They started last Thursday, so that they were still pretty bad then. So yeah, and people will get increasingly the kind of the public health side of it, which Swinney warned about yesterday, will kind of worsen, and I think that's when people, COSLA and the government will go, this really needs to be fixed, and the unions are going to stick to their guns. Wendy Dunsmore from Unite said that the situation could get worse. We're going to strike more. So yeah, they do have the upper hand here, and when it does, in other cities like Aberdeen, Dundee, Glasgow, when the bins start to overflow there, I mean, yeah, it is going to get a lot worse, and the government are really going to just have to stump up money to resolve this issue.
Moving on to what is without doubt the issue that is causing most anxiety to people across the United Kingdom, this prospect of exorbitant energy price rises. We're going to have the price cap being lifted, and probably bills will rise to between £3,500 to £4,000 a year. And the question is, what is the government going to do to stop people falling into abject poverty? Now, we had I think we splashed it this week, a story about one of the power bosses, Keith Anderson at Scottish Power, calling for a £100 billion policy whereby bills would effectively be frozen for a couple of years. Torcuil, what did you make of this? And without sort of backing this exact proposal, do you think something of this magnitude will eventually have to be picked up by the UK government?
It's one of these issues where something has to be done, quite clearly. Tomorrow's a big bang day. Tomorrow's the day Ofgem, the energy regulator, announces the price cap for October. Every 3 months, the price cap goes up. So that's expected to go up from something like an average of £1,500 a year for the average house now up to £3,500 or more, perhaps an 80% rise in your October bill. It'll go up again in January to nearly 5,000 and possibly by April 6,000. It can't be done. People will be in desperation and destitution, as the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon describes, and every charity and organisation, poverty organisation working in Scotland has warned that as well. So no one's promised a solution yet. Labour came up with a £29 billion plan to freeze the prices at October levels through the winter. That would cost a lot of money. If they extended that through the year, it would cost more than furlough cost during the pandemic. But the power bosses themselves, who are the people delivering the power, who are also going to see their customers defaulting on payments. Let's admit this, let's face up to this, people won't be able to afford to pay their bills. They've come up with a better scheme, a bigger scheme. They say, we see your 29 billion and we raise you 100 billion. Keith Anderson, the chairman of Scottish Power, has come up with this plan to bank the rise, just put it in a pot, 100 billion, 200 billion over 2 years actually, and keep bills at their present level, and to decide later on how that 200 billion should be paid off. Should be paid off in higher individual taxes? Should be paid off with a surcharge on people's future bills over the next 10, 15, 20 years perhaps? Or perhaps, who knows, paid off with a big windfall on the oil and gas companies that are making quite a big profit out of wholesale prices just now. Two good things about the Anderson plan, if we can call it that. A, it freezes bills now. That's good. It'll take the fear out of people because people are very worried about going into the winter and facing these bills. And B, it kind of parks the problem. It allows time to sort out how to pay this off, because it has to be paid off somehow. So an incoming Prime Minister, we think it's going to be Liz Truss, if she adopted this plan, and Keith Anderson gave this plan to a roundtable Nicola Sturgeon convened in Edinburgh this week. He'd also spoken to Kwasi Kwarteng, the UK Energy and Business Minister in Westminster earlier. The plan is in Whitehall. It's one of the options that could be presented to an incoming Prime Minister, a week Monday, and then it'll have to be enacted pretty quickly, because tomorrow people will know how much they're going to be paying in October, and they're going to get a fright.
Peter, these rises, if they were to go ahead, will affect every single daily record user. So every time you put on the heating, every time you use the shower, use the kettle, washing machine, it's going to have a major impact on people's finances. And yet you look at Liz Truss, and she's talking about cutting national insurance, which puts pennies back in the pockets of Scots and people across the UK. She's talking about scrapping the green levy, which I think is about 150 quid a year. Do you think that there'll be a danger for Liz Truss, that she's seen as just completely out of step with what seems to be an emerging consensus amongst power giants and the Labour Party that something quite big and drastic needs to be done?
Yeah, I mean, the politicians who are on astronomical wages, that just don't understand what people are going to be, the situation that people are going to be in. It's, I mean, there's fuel poverty is kind of skyrocket, and actual poverty is just going to be it's going to rocket as well. But yeah, you're right that we've spoken about this on this stream before, that we know that the civil service is actually coming up with a number of plans to present to the next Prime Minister when they come in. So it'll be interesting to see, because, like you say, what she is proposing is it's nothing. It's £150. That's when your fuel bill is going to go up by 80%. It is absolutely nothing. So it was also interesting that Nadeem Zahawi was asked his reaction on the proposals by Keith Anderson. He said that nothing was off the table. So I think he's clearly knows what's going on in the civil service, kind of the Treasury at the moment. So I think they're not going to copy someone else's proposal, like the windfall tax. They went a bit further than Labour's one when Sunak was the Chancellor. So yeah, there'll be their own plan, and we just need to wait and see and then what it is and how drastic it is, because I think it does need to be a big plan that really helps people get through the winter months, because I mean we're only in August now and people are already struggling. So it is going to get a lot worse by the time we get to January, when we've got that next cap that comes in.
And the last thing that I want to discuss on this live stream is Nicola Sturgeon's appearance at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I mean, she had a few appearances, but the one I went to was an interview with the sports journalist Graham Spears. It was quite a lively interview, lasted for about an hour. Certainly from a journalistic perspective, there were quite a few news lines in it. One of them related to the abuse by pro-independence activists of the BBC journalist James Cook, who I think was called a scumbag rat and also a traitor by these charming individuals. And during the interview, Nicola Sturgeon basically condemned what she described as a fringe element in the nationalist movement. What did you make of her comments, Torcuil?
Well, fair enough. We've all suffered, just with James Cook, we've all suffered what James Cook suffered and worse over the years, as a certain element of either side, but the nationalist side mainly, it has to be said, attacks the media for not representing reality as it sees it. Now, Sturgeon distanced herself from these attacks at the time, shortly after the Cook video went viral, and she took the opportunity again when Graham Spears, that charming man, grilled her at the festival. It wasn't the only appearance she made at the festival, she made quite a few appearances at the festival. Fair enough, she's distanced herself from them, from these individuals, who I suspect are people who left mainstream SNP activism a long time ago. She may have no control over these people or their membership of any party or organisation that they wish to belong to. But I think she should have condemned this kind of behaviour a long time ago. This kind of behaviour was going on in 2014 when people marched on BBC Scotland's headquarters at Pacific Quay and demanded the head of Nick Robinson, the then political editor of the BBC. And if Sturgeon had pushed back against that then I don't know, would the debate have been any more civic? I don't know. We can't replay history like that. But one thing's for sure is that Sturgeon hasn't really pushed back against fundamentalist nationalism quite hard enough, I think. And the fact that she's now kind of dancing to the tune of a 2023 independence referendum, which I think she suspects is not achievable herself, shows that she hasn't pushed back hard enough. I mean, I keep saying this, the SNP quite successfully became the Labour Party in Scotland, quite successfully became left of centre and adopted their values and their voters. But what Nicola Sturgeon has failed to do is become Tony Blair. Tony Blair made Labour electable by almost going to war with his own party, taking a stance against his own party to prove to undecided voters, people who hadn't made up their mind up to trust Labour, that they could, while he was in charge of, while he contained the wilder elements of the left. Now, Nicola Sturgeon hasn't done the same thing in trying to contain the wilder elements of nationalism, a large part of whom will have left the SNP by now and gone to Alba or other organisations, perhaps. But if she'd chosen to tackle her own party a little bit and stand in the centre ground a bit more of where Scotland is constitutionally and politically, she might have more success, but that remains to be seen.
Peter, something else she said, inevitably in interviews now, she's always asked about how long she's got left in office, because she is now Scotland's longest serving First Minister. And I don't have the direct quote in front of me, but she effectively said that she's not going to be the sort of politician who clings to office when she knows that her time is up. Something like that. There seems to be a feeling that she wants to see the second IndyRef process through from a legal perspective, and also the general election. But do you think it's interesting that there is so much discussion about when she's going to stand down?
Yeah, I mean, but she kind of has to kind of show that she's not going to be there forever. Because I mean, let's just say the referendum does go ahead next year, and she loses it, she's going to have to. She'll put her step down, like Alex Salmond did. So she has to show that, yeah, I've been thinking about this for a while. It's not just like a kind of a snap decision I've made here. So yeah, I mean, there's been chat about this for a while. That the fact that she is now Scotland's longest serving First Minister. But yeah, I mean, just to set herself up for after politics. She's still relatively young when you think about it. So yeah, she needs to think of her future really. And yeah, I mean, people will always go, "Who's next?" Then and it just kind of gets people speaking, and maybe takes us off some of the issues that really need to be addressed.
Just to go back, Torcuil, to a point that you mentioned about Nicola Sturgeon maybe not standing up at an earlier stage to more extreme elements of her own movement. Something else she said, which was interesting, is that she considers herself to be Scottish and British. Just interested to get your thoughts on that. Do you think that was maybe an attempt to sort of reach out to people who've got a dual identity, maybe try to broaden the base a little bit?
For sure it was, but once again, slightly late. You remember, you and I have a pedigree where we can remember Andrew Wilson saying that he might be quite proud to fly a Union Jack on occasion, and was slammed by the SNP for that. In fact, was ranked so low in the selection process that he lost his seat as an MSP. Now, what Sturgeon did in saying that she accepted, identified, and felt British sometimes, Scottish sometimes, at other times, that she has a layered identity. We all have a layered identity because we live in the British Isles, as she said herself, but we'll always retain this kind of sense of Britishness, even if Scotland becomes an independent country. That you sense Sturgeon there moving once again into where the mainstream, where most Scots are. I feel Hebridean, I feel Scottish, I feel British, I feel European. People have different layers of identity, and she's maybe moving into that kind. But once again, she should have done this a lot earlier. And of course, she's crossed that Rubicon now. Every political leader does. Where people start questioning their shelf life and what they'll do next and how long they'll be around for. It may be not up to Nicola Sturgeon to find that sweet spot of identity where people feel British and Scottish enough to choose independence over remaining in the UK. And that might be left to the next nationalist leader who tries to take the SNP and Scotland on that path.
That's great. Thanks, Torcuil. Thanks, Peter. I think that pretty much wraps it up. In next week's live stream, I think that we'll be looking at the Tory leadership contest, which seems to have gone on for about 150 years. Next week, it will be its last lap, and hopefully we'll be nearing towards a conclusion. And we'll probably look back on Boris Johnson's interesting time in Downing Street as well. So if you've enjoyed this live stream, please follow us on Twitter. We've got our own Twitter web page, which is at record_politics. We've also got a politics group on a Facebook site as well, where you can keep abreast of all of our content. So thanks for joining us again, and hope to see you soon.